Guess who's not playing in the World Series this year? The Mets, of course, but the Phillies have been knocked out of the playoffs. We'll be discussing that more on today's edition, Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. Want to find any of my work? Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed by visiting fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, I'm at peace, and I'm sure that's a similar feeling for a lot of you Mets fans out there, because guess what? The Braves aren't winning the World Series and the Phillies aren't winning the World Series. So at this point, look at the 2023 season, and yeah, it was a rough year for the Mets. They certainly had the most disappointing season of any team in this division. But guess what? If your season doesn't end in a championship, it's always going to end in disappointment. The Braves were very disappointed when they took their magical run through the regular season and saw it evaporate against the Phillies in the NLCS. And then the Phillies thought they were destined to go to the World Series and complete what they started last year. Watched as the team that beat them last year, the Houston Astros, got eliminated. They wouldn't have had to square up against the defending champs again. Instead, it would have been playing against the upstart but pretty amazing Texas Rangers. And no, they're out of it. And really, it's pretty shocking that the Arizona Diamondbacks pulled this thing off, because the Phillies were clearly the favorite going in. They were riding high. They swept the Marlins. They beat the Braves. If you look at what they did then going into the NLCS by taking the first two games in Philadelphia, they had a run of 6 consecutive wins at Citizens Bank Park. They outscored their competition by a total of 39-8. And their second game in the NLCS, they won 10-0, just completely steamrolled the Diamondbacks. And they were a national story. There's, of course, a day off for travel before you get to game 3. And everyone's talking about this Phillies team, how they have the greatest home field advantage in all of sports. Man, no one can go into the bank and win games because the Phillies fans are just that good, and the Phillies play that good in front of those fans. It's impossible. Bryce Harper is taking a bunch of interviews and going on shows just to discuss how amazing it is to play for the Phillies. Garrett Stubbs, the backup catcher, he gives the Diamondbacks some bulletin board material, talking about how the Phillies can't wait to make a beeline to that pool when they finish off the Arizona Diamondbacks in Phoenix. It's just going to be great stuff, right? Well, had they won game 3, all of that could have taken place. They could still be considered the favorites. I don't know if it would have been them or the Rangers who would have been the favorites in that World Series matchup, but we'll never know because the Diamondbacks just were amazing in the last 5 games of that series. Showed incredible fight, and it's a fun team to root for because I'll tell you what, I became a Diamondbacks fan over the past week. I was rooting very hard to see the Phillies get knocked out of it, and you see Brandon Pfaadt in game 3, and immediately I'm like, okay, this series is done. He hadn't pitched well in the playoffs. It's a big stage for a rookie. And he goes into that game that was a must win for the Diamondbacks, gives them 5 2/3 scoreless, strikes at 9, only gives up 2 hits. The bullpen held down the fort. The offense didn't really score. Both teams put up a run in the 7th. That was it. It goes to extras. Ketel Marte walked it off, and the Diamondbacks had life. Then game 4, again, it was a battle, but the Diamondbacks pulled it out. It was back and forth. The Phillies at one point had a 5-2 lead in the 7th inning, but they gave up a run in the bottom of the 7th. Craig Kimbrell gave up a game-tying home run in the 8th. Diamondbacks grabbed a lead in that 8th inning, and Paul Sewald was on to close it out. It's amazing to have a full circle moment, I think, for a lot of Mets fans. Paul Sewald goes out to Seattle. He was unbelievable out there as a closer. First as a setup man, eventually a closer. But you didn't see him often, right? He's out there in the American League West. He's just not something that comes across your screen too often. You might have seen the stats, like, wow, that's the same Paul Sewald. But then he gets traded to the National League at the deadline, and all of a sudden he is the closer of the team that you're rooting for against the Phillies. And this dude was lights out all series. Really was huge for the Diamondbacks, just like Zach Wheeler was for the Phillies. It hurts every time you see him pitch in that uniform. Game 5, he put the Phillies on the precipice, right? He was able to give them momentum back by being dominant through 7 innings. And the Phillies cruised in Game 5. After that game, they still had all that same swagger, all that same confidence. Bryce Harper is out there calling Bryson Stott the best second baseman in baseball. I wrote a whole article on justbaseball.com about how ridiculous that statement was and did a podcast on my other show, Who's Better Baseball, where I broke that down, how Stott was the worst second baseman left in the playoffs, much less being the best second baseman in all of baseball. But yeah, they had all this confidence and swagger back. And I think they, in their heart of hearts, believed they were going to the World Series and they were going to win it. But you show up to Game 6 wearing all black, Bryce Harper, thinking it's a funeral for the Diamondbacks, going into your ballpark where you hadn't lost yet. It turns out to go the other direction. And who was it who grabbed that momentum back for the Diamondbacks and carried them through over the last 2 games? None other than Tommy Pham hitting a home run off Aaron Nola. And the floodgates opened. The Diamondbacks cruised in Game 6. And Game 7 tonight was a really tight game. But again, it was Brandon Pfaadt who gave up just 2 runs through 4 innings and outdueled Ranger Suarez, who gave up 3. And then they tacked on another, and just the bullpen held on. They held on to that lead. 4-2 was the final score. It was Sewald on the mound to close it, and the Phillies are out. And you look at this division, Phillies have 2 World Series titles. The Mets have 2 World Series titles. The Marlins have 2 World Series titles. The Nationals have 1. The Braves technically have 4, but 2 of them came before they actually ended up in Atlanta. One was in 1914. One was in 1957. I don't know if we really should count those. So I look at this division as pretty much even. Yeah, the Braves have dominated it when it comes to winning division titles. Yes, the Phillies have been probably the second best team over the last couple decades when it just comes to overall division titles and playoff success. But guess what? The Mets can still get that 3rd title first. So I'm feeling good today. Yeah, sure. Phillies fans, rain what I'm looking for. Rain down the criticism of the Mets on me. Lash out. It's okay. I understand why you're upset today. But my opinion, sucks to be you right now. Probably worse than it sucks to be me. I've come to terms with the Mets being out of this thing for months. So I've been moved on to 2024 for a long time, and I don't think Phillies fans were expecting it. But now, moving forward, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made by the Phillies, and some of them could coincide with the Mets. Some players who could depart in free agency that the Mets could go after, some like-minded free agent targets. I want to get into the Phillies' plans in 2024 next. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today, so it's important to always be prepared. Supply chain shortages for medications or an inability to get medications in a timely manner due to natural disasters or travel, this could leave you unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical is providing the Jase case, 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jase was doctor created and is doctor recommended. You can also customize your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications. You can even add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Personally, my wife and I, we like to travel, like to get out, and when we do, it's good to have some extra security, and that's what the Jase case provided for us. If you're interested as well, go to jasemedical.com. Enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON at Jase Medical, Jase medical.com. Before we dive into the Phillies roster decisions, I wanted to talk to all you about becoming a Locked On Mets insider. This is a new program we are running through Subtext where you get one-on-one conversation with me via text. You can send me a message there anytime. It's just like texting one of your friends right there on your phone. You also get the text updates I send to all the Locked On Mets insiders. So you might have the inside scoop on what I'm going to talk about for Thursday's show, and you can fire away some questions beforehand that I can bring onto the show, but I'll also answer via subtext. It's been a really good way for me to bounce ideas off you guys, to have you guys bounce ideas off me, and to get to know some of the listeners a little bit better. So I really do appreciate everyone who has subscribed up to this point, and appreciate all of you who want to join. You can find a link again in the episode description or go to subtext.com/lockedonmets. Now, looking at the Phillies roster moving forward, this is a team that is well constructed and ready to continue to contend. There's no doubt about that. They are way ahead of the Mets right now on paper. Their lineup, it's set. It's locked up. JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber, 2 more years with both of them. So that's your primary window. You have Nick Castellanos for 3 more years, 8 more years for Bryce Harper, 10 more for Trey Turner. So there's the longer Harper Turner window where maybe you have to reimagine this team once or twice to continue to win during that decade. But for now, it's the Realmuto, Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper, Turner team. And you have young guys who have filtered in. Brandon Marsh, he's still pre-arb. Johan Rojas was a rookie this year. Really good defensive center fielder. Is he going to hit enough? They'll find out next year over a full season by a guy that you want to give more opportunities to. Bryson Stott is the best second baseman in baseball, according to Bryce Harper. But really, he is probably a fringe top 5, definite top 10 second baseman in baseball who's still pre-arbitration. So that's a really good value deal for them right now. They have him locked up. They don't have to worry about paying him for some time. And who knows? He might be a guy they give a pre-arb extension to try to make that window a little bit longer. Alec Boehm hits arbitration now. So they have 3 years with him under relative cheap control. And they don't really have to do anything to their lineup. They can roll with that team. That right there was 9 guys that they can stick with. The question is, what do you do with Rhys Hoskins? Didn't see him at all this year. He tore his ACL, but he was a really productive player in a Phillies uniform prior to that. He was their starting first baseman. Harper was in the outfield, then he was a DH. Harper this year made the move to first base. It was great for the team. It allows Schwarber to be the DH. Now, what do? Do they want to put Harper back in the outfield? That would take away playing time from either Rojas or Marsh because you're not going to take Nick Castellanos out of right field as long as you have Kyle Schwarber. That has to be your DH. So are they going to go back there? Or do they want to keep Harper at first base? Going to be 31 years old, or he already is 31 years old, I think. Is he 31 or is he going to be 31? What happens when the guy debuts at 19 years old? He is already 31. So he just turned 31 this month. So they have obviously some time where he can still go back out there and play the outfield, but you have him locked up for 8 more years. Maybe you want to preserve him and keep him at first base. And I think with more time, he's going to get better and better at first base. He didn't put up great defensive metrics there, but athletically, there's no reason he can't become a really good first baseman if he stays at the position. I think that's probably the safest bet for them moving forward. So on one hand, yeah, you extend him the qualifying offer of $20.5 million, and he probably still tests the open market. And you get draft pick compensation. But also, if you're the Phillies in their present situation with all the money they have out there, I don't think that having Hoskins on the books at $20 million is really worth it for this team, especially when they got a really tough decision to make on Aaron Nola. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were just so scared that he was going to accept it that they don't offer it to him. I could actually see them which is crazy because you look at this class, there's every reason for Hoskins, even coming off the ACL tear, to test the market because he's still probably the best first baseman on the market. The other guys are much older. So he would be the top guy at that position. And you look at the bats, there's Ohtani and Cody Bellinger. I think he's probably the 3rd best hitter in free agency. Maybe you like Teoscar Hernandez more, but I don't know. So if I'm him, I'm ending up in free agency no matter what, because I think he can at least get a 3-year deal with an opt-out at maybe not quite $20.5 million per, but a lot more guaranteed money on the 3-year deal coming off the ACL. So I think that's likely what happens. It's just going to be interesting if they even extend it to him because they might be so scared he's going to take it that they just say, you know what, the draft pick's not worth it. I think that'll be pretty telling of where they're at when it comes to spending. Then they got the decision on Nola. So they have Zach Wheeler for one more season. Ranger Suarez has 3 arbitration years. They have Taijuan Walker for 3 more years. Guy didn't even pitch in the playoffs. Was healthy. Was relatively good in the regular season. They knew he was not a guy you wanted to put in front of a really good playoff lineup. $18 million he's making per year. And there's Mets fans that were mad they didn't resign him last year. I think the Mets made out pretty good on that one. Christopher Sanchez is pre-arb, so they have him locked up. But how much do they trust him as a starting pitcher? They have Nick Abel and Griff McGarry coming up, 2 of their top 5 prospects who could be in the rotation next season. Their top prospect overall is Andrew Painter, but he had Tommy John surgery. I think it's either June or July, so probably won't see him next year. They're in a tough spot. Do they bring Nola back? If they want to be as good next year, they sort of have to. But as we'll talk about more in the next segment, they were far apart in contract extension talks. So how does that resume now? And if he is gone, how do they replace him? It's going to be tough. It's going to be interesting. I mean, they're sitting right now, the payroll before arbitration numbers kick in. I counted at around 180 million. And then the arbitration numbers, according to Spot Track, are supposed to be, over 20 million. I mean, you look at it, they were a luxury tax team the last 2 years. How long are they going to be a repeater tax team? I would think while they have this core locked up, they would be for the next 2 seasons. But then they could, when Real Muto and Schwarber come off the books, with maybe Wheeler already off the books as well, there could be a window where they turn this thing around when it comes to their payroll and reset. And so with that, how do you make your decision on Aaron Nola? And do the Mets get in the mix on Aaron Nola? That's what I want to discuss next. 2 teams that should be going after the top of the starting pitching market. How do both of them factor in? And also, would the Mets even consider signing a Rhys Hoskins? We'll get to all of that next. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The World Series begins on Friday. If you are yet to make your postseason debut, now's your chance with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on the action from the first pitch till the final out. You can bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. You can also look and bet on who you think is going to win the series. I mean, the Diamondbacks are this little engine that could. You never know. The Rangers are going to be favored, but maybe you throw a little something on the Diamondbacks. Hey, maybe you put that first $5 bet on the Diamondbacks to get your $200 of guaranteed bonus bets. If you want to join today, you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Step up to the plate again for the $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So according to Spot Track, right now, the Phillies' luxury tax payroll is estimated to be $224 million next season. The threshold's at 237. So they're already pushing up against the luxury tax. Now, I believe they are still calculating Scott Kingery's $13 million club option. What a funny contract that was. Go look up the history of Scott Kingery and how confident the Phillies were that this guy was going to be awesome, that they gave him a pre-arb extension before he even played in the big leagues, how he never panned out. They had to pay him $1 million still to get out of that contract, funny enough. But even if that knocks it down, they're still at best sitting at $210 million before free agency. You have a guy like Gregory Soto who's going to make $4 million in arbitration. He didn't pitch that great this year. I could see them non-tendering him. So yeah, you can keep shaving, but pretty much if you pay Aaron Nola, you're going to be right up against the luxury tax. But if you have to replace him, how do you do it without being a luxury tax team? So I think they will blow through it, but I don't think they're going to be spending at New York Mets level, right? They're going to probably stay where they've been the last couple of years, where, yeah, you cross it, but your total payroll commitments come out to $250, $260 million. So they might have $40 million to play with, which means re-signing Nola. And then if you have Hoskins back on the qualifying offer, that's it. That's the budget. That's why I really think there's a chance that they don't extend it, because for Hoskins, hey, maybe you think that the best offer you're going to get is like 3 years, $45 million in free agency, and you believe in yourself. Well, you can take the higher salary 1 year, play it out, and test the market again. And hey, maybe you just saw another run and you want to be a part of it. You want to stay a Philly, and this is your one avenue to do that. So I am clearly fascinated by their decision on Hoskins. When it comes to this top of the market, right, with the starting pitchers, this is where these two teams once again overlap. They're going to be going for the same guys. And it's funny because they'd have a lot more money to spend if they didn't give Taijuan Walker $18 million a year. But they have that in the books, and they got to figure out a way around it. Here's the interesting reporting that took place. Apparently during this year, Bob Nightingale had reported that Aaron Nola wanted an 8-year deal worth more than $200 million. And the Phillies were looking more at the $100 million range over like 4 or 5 years. So they were well apart, and the negotiations just stalled. How do they feel about Nola now? And does Nola still want 8 years? I don't think he gets it. He'll turn 31, I believe, before next season, but actually, he turns 31 next June. Sorry, I had that note down here. But regardless, I think 7 years, maybe the best he's going to get. Even with that, I don't know if the Phillies go there. I mean, here's a pitcher that has been as durable as any starter in baseball. He eats innings. He always strikes out batters. The ERA can fluctuate year to year. Some years he just gives up way more home runs than others. And getting out of that ballpark would probably help him a little bit. But he still has a 3.72 career ERA. He's a really good pitcher. And I've talked about this in the past. He's a guy that doesn't have to rely on overpowering velocity, which I think, for one, might be why he's been so durable, and two, could make him a good bet to age well, because he hasn't always had the velocity he's had to lean on. He's just a really effective pitcher with movement. I would not be mad at all if the Mets sign Aaron Nola. I still think Yoshinobu Yamamoto is the top priority, but that could be the top priority for Philly as well. So that would be interesting. Where does Yamamoto want to pitch in that scenario? I think with Kodai Senga in his ear, with the possibility of pitching in that bandbox, I don't necessarily think he would choose the Phillies, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Phillies would prefer him over Nola, because he's 25, not 30. So it's really going to be interesting how the market develops, particularly for the Phillies, because they are more in a win now mode than the Mets. I think the Mets are still going to try to win now, but the Phillies sort of have to. So if, let's just say, Aaron Nola signs with another team and Yamamoto signs with the Mets, are they going to get Blake Snell? Is that the move? I don't really foresee that. I think Snell is a West Coast guy that's probably going to want to stay out in the West Coast. So if that's the case, right, where do you go in the market? Jordan Montgomery? Possibility? Here's the guy that I think signs with the Phillies. You can book this down as a prediction that I think comes true. I think Marcus Stroman is the guy. I think that the talks with Nola are going to stall quickly. They'll extend the qualifying offer. They'll be excited to get the draft pick compensation when he signs, and signs for a big number, which means that pick will be very good. I think Nola is a Diamondback. I could see that. Him pitching for the team that just eliminated them in the playoffs feels very Madison Bumgarner, Zach Greinke to me. If not there, the Cubs, the Giants, he'll have a market. So let's say Nola is, we'll call him a Giant. Okay, so Nola's a Giant. Yamamoto's a Met. Snell is a Mariner. I think he's from the Seattle area. All of a sudden, you're looking at the market and seeing what's out there. Marcus Stroman, they love former Mets. It just fits. It feels good. Not good, but it feels right. A rotation of Zach Wheeler, Marcus Stroman, and Taijuan Walker. I mean, come on. Isn't that it? Come on. It's got to be. It's got to be. I see it now as clear as day. I picture Stroman in that Philly uniform. I'll probably love him out there, honestly. It's a match made in heaven. But it also is a step back for the Phillies if that's the way they go, because I think Aaron Nola is a better pitcher than Marcus Stroman, particularly in the playoffs. But you never know. You never know. It might be perfect for them. So That's what I think happens. If you had to predict it now, that's my guess. Again, as it relates to Nola and the Mets, if they don't get Yamamoto, I mean, Aaron Nola is probably as good of an option as you're going to find in free agency. It's either him or Jordan Montgomery in my eyes. I don't like Blake Snell on the Mets next year. I just don't think that one's going to happen. Now, getting to Hoskins on the Mets, another really interesting one. I know I told the listeners that today's show is going to be breaking down my offseason outlook that I wrote for Just Baseball, which is live on the site. You can check that out. Because of the Phillies losing, I pushed that to tomorrow's show. I'll get into really a blueprint for the Mets offseason, which I outlined in that article. But one of the things I mentioned is if you're trying to win now, you should probably address the DH spot because, yes, you can just count on Mark Vientos. And part of me would be happy to see the Mets say, hey, we're going to trust that our young players are going to thrive. And hey, if we have to add a DH at the deadline, we do. But maybe Vientos can fill that need. With that said, if you're trying to go for it, you need another proven run producer in that lineup. And Hoskins fits the bill. He's never hit less than 27 home runs over a full season. He's never drove in less than 70. He's got a career 846 OPS. His career WRC plus, which is weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters on a league average of 100. It's 126. He is a consistently above average hitter. And he'd also be some insurance on Alonso leaving if you sign him to, say, a 3-year deal like I was discussing with the opt-out after year one. I think that the Mets would ultimately look in a different direction. You can sign someone that can DH but still play a corner outfield spot. Like you can sign Michael Brantley this offseason on a 1-year deal, and ideally he's your DH, but hey, if some guys go down the outfield, you need to slide him out to left because Mark Vientos is hitting well, you can do that. Or Justin Turner's out there. You can play some third base if you needed to, but you can kind of have him penciled in your mind as the DH. I think that's part of it where Hoskins is just a terrible defensive first baseman, and him and Alonso just, I don't know. It could work, but I just don't necessarily see it. I even look at JD Martinez and I just think if you have to give Hoskins a multi-year deal for a guy that it really comes down to if you're going to re-sign Alonso. And if I'm still under the assumption the Mets will eventually get a contract hammered out with Alonso, then having him and Hoskins on the same team for multiple years doesn't necessarily make sense. Whereas you could just get a JD Martinez or a Brandon Belt on a 1-year deal and roll with that instead as your DH. So we'll see. It'll be an interesting thing to see if the Mets actually go after Hoskins. But there is a good chance, I think, that they'll have conversations with both of those guys in free agency. And the Phillies, look, again, they're clearly the second best team in this division on opening day next year when it comes to the eyes of the odds makers, I think. I don't think the Mets could do anything this offseason with how much they just flopped, where people would really believe in them as a better team to make a deep run than the Phillies. The Phillies just did it 2 years in a row. With that said, they enjoyed great health this year. Don't know how much longer that's going to hold up because that's just typical, right? You have a healthy year, next year might be different. And I think that they're approaching an end of the window a lot sooner than some might think, just based on guys in their 30s on big money deals that come off the books. And it's just how long is Middleton willing to keep paying a tax bill compared to Cohen, where he's going to always be pretty comfortable with it. So we'll see. I think long term, Phillies fans would hate me for saying this. I think long term, the Mets have a brighter future just because of the ownership situation. But then again, Phillies fans can say they have Bryce Harper for the next 8 years, and it's hard to combat what that could mean for them. And eventually it might mean a championship, but not this year. Go Diamondbacks again. I don't really care who wins the World Series, but hey, go D-backs. Tomorrow's show again, I'll be breaking down my offseason outlook, giving you a blueprint to the Mets moves they must make this offseason. So make sure you check out that show. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Join our Locked On Mets insiders in the episode description or by going to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. And follow the show on X at Locked On Mets.